Okay, good afternoon. It's 20 to 5 UK time. So it's been a very hot, humid day today, which has been really draining. It's knocked me for six. Absolutely exhausting. But since the last live stream, Manchester United beat Liverpool 2-1. The protests outside the club against the Glazers' ownership went ahead a half hour before kickoff. That is the third such protest since April. So this is not a new thing. We've discussed the Manchester United situation in regards to their protests against the Glazier ownership for quite some time. And when I do the club history video on Manchester United, I will be looking at the Glazers' ownership since they got full control of the club till now, and and chart the successes and failures of the club um, since 2004, 2005, when the Glazers first started buying stake in the club, and then they got the controlling stake, and where the club is at now. Fulham lost to Crawley Town in the League Cup. It's a big shock. Um, and I would say Fulham, even though they ran away with the championship last season, I still can't. Fulham don't just look like another Norwich. They look like another yo-yo club. I can't see them stabilising in the Premier League. They can't seem to adjust. So we'll be interested to see how Fulham respond to that League Cup defeat. Rugby Union, we were discussing the situation with Worcester and Wasps, and other clubs are also uh, supposedly in financial difficulty. That doesn't really surprise me with how things have been going with the sport, really, money wise, for quite some time. Even before the pandemic, I don't think professionalism has worked as well as it should have. And there's been a lot of issues with the sport financially for quite some time. So the Worcester Warriors and the Wasp situation will be very, very interesting to see how that develops in the coming days and weeks, and whether um, whether they do go into administration, and what the future holds for rugby union at a professional level, and is the current system sustainable? Quite frankly, we've seen clearly it's not, and so we'll have to see how it plays out there. Yeah, I wasn't actually where the League Cup was being played last night. Quite frankly, and they've got to get all these fixtures in. The world with the World Cup taking place mid-season, they've had to start the seasons earlier. You know, the League Cup. The League Cup doesn't get the attention it used to. It has been devalued as a competition. It was the League Cup, yes. It has been devalued as a competition in recent decades. But it is really weird having like League Cup games in August. Um, but this is the one of the consequences of having the World Cup uh, at the time of year that we're having it. There is going to be a fixture pile up before the World Cup and after the World Cup. It's going to be a chaotic time of year. I mean, bearing in mind in 2020 and in 2021, the amount of COVID cases we had. In 2020, um, it was chaotic in the sense that the amount of fixtures that were postponed due to the COVID pandemic was ridiculous. Can you just imagine that? 2 years ago. Um, the the fixture pile up is going to be chaotic, and I think this is this is something that FIFA's got to take accountability for with the hosting of the World Cup in Qatar, um, and what's since come out about FIFA in the last 6, 7, 8 years, and the allegations, against the organisation and the corruption and the criminal investigations. They've had opportunities since awarding the World Cup to Qatar to withdraw that award, basically, and give it to another country. They've signed. Well, it's going to be a very controversial World Cup. I wonder what the TV viewership is going to be like, and the fans actually in attendance. That's going to be interesting. Is what the viewership's going to be like. especially in Europe. Um, oh God, according to Talksport, Arsenal on UEFA's financial fair play watch lists. Look, we know the financial fair play system is broken, and I'm just going to leave that as it is. It's clearly look, Alexander Serafin, the president of UEFA, said financial fair play is broken. It doesn't work. So if the guy in charge of the organisation who has the rule in place says that the system as it currently is doesn't work, yet there's no urgency to speed up, um, the reform process of said system, then it allowed things like the European Super League idea to get as far as it did. It's allowed clubs that should basically be a license to print money get into millions, if not billions, of dollars, euros, and pounds in debt. Look at Barcelona. So it's just a mess, quite frankly. The financial situation. I'll take anything that Talksport say with a pinch of salt, and UEFA's record in punishing clubs on financial fair play breaches. They can just appeal at the Court of Arbitration for Sport and get their penalty reduced or overturned. So it's a weak system with weak punishments, because in reality, 70 to 80% of the top European clubs. If we are really going to talk about the financial rules and punishments for clubs, 80%, I would say, of English clubs in the top four divisions would be in breach of the spending rules that are in place that are linked to financial fair play. The 135% loss over profit rule, about 70 clubs in the top 92 would be in breach of that at some point in the last decade, depending on what metrics you use and how you break it down. So and if they were to be all properly punished under the rules, point deductions would be all over the place. They just can't allow that to happen because it makes them look bad. What's going on with Liverpool? The Sadio Mane transfer. He's had a very good start at Bayern Munich. There are some injuries. So you can start a season slow, and win the league. Man United in 1992-93 season lost their first two games like they did this season with similar scorelines. Went on to win the league. Went on to win the league the next couple of seasons. So just because a club has a slow start, drops a few points here or there, I don't think it is necessarily the end of the world. But I think they are giving. But then Man City, they didn't beat Newcastle, and at one point they were 3-1 down. So Man City are looking vulnerable as well. So in reality, I think it's more open this year. I think the league is more open this year. Arsenal are unbeaten, 3 wins out of 3, top of the table. Someone's made a bit of money on that, I would have thought. So I think it's a more open league this year. I think from the point that Leicester winning the Premier League in 2016 till now, that has actually made the league a bit more competitive and open. And Liverpool win it for the first time in 30 odd years, the first time they win the Premier League. It's suddenly new names are getting on the trophy. I would say it's more open than than it has been for a while. Can anything be done to improve attendance in the Welsh domestic league? That's one of those domestic leagues that has never really had a strong. It's rugby. It's a rugby country. It's Wales. Rugby is the national sport, and Wales doesn't have the corporate money. I don't know how you improve attendances, but Wales does not have the corporate money. The biggest Welsh clubs play in the English league system. There's your problem. And even at rugby union, with rugby union and rugby league, the attendances domestically are really poor as well when it comes to Welsh professional sports. So I don't know what you do with improving attendances within the domestic league structure. Obviously, the interest is on the Premier League and other top leagues, or rugby union as well. And that is a bigger question that I think Welsh sport has to ask itself is why things are the way they are. I think possibly if Wales have a good World Cup and the Welsh FA can build upon that, and try and promote the domestic league game, then yes, absolutely, there could be an opportunity to improve attendances. But then you've got to look at the economics. Some parts of Wales are really ranked quite lowly economically. Some communities in Wales have very high unemployment, very low job prospects, very low wages. That's another problem that um, the Welsh economy has in certain parts of Wales. The fact that Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, Newport, Merthyr Tydfil are all part of the English league system is another problem. The two most successful Welsh clubs play in the English league system, finance, trophies, that kind of thing. And also the UEFA coefficient doesn't help either, which is a problem. Um, but I would argue that unfortunately rugby union is the sport of choice in Wales, and then there's been the discussion about, well, it's too south east Welsh centric, which is also true. But the majority of the population of Wales lives in the southeast of Wales. But I don't know how you fix it. I think the Welsh FA are going to have to hope that the Welsh national side have a good World Cup, and then try and build upon that, and try and look at funneling some of that interest into the club game in Wales. But it doesn't get much attention um, in the British media. There's not much attention given to it. Attendances are poor for a reason. So there is that. Should the new Saints go into the English league system? Well, they are an English club, but they play in the Welsh league. It's like Berwick Rangers playing in the Scottish league system. It's a difficult question. Um, they might look at that option, but I think a bigger concern would be, why is the sport not being supported domestically in Wales outside of a handful of clubs? And I think the answer to that is those clubs that have higher attendances play in the English league system. So, and the English league system is an imperfect system. There are a lot of clubs with money problems as well, and don't necessarily, the money isn't evenly distributed. We saw that a couple of years ago during the winter wave of the COVID pandemic in 2020 to the beginning of 2021, when more lockdowns were introduced. That League One and League Two, for example, were screaming for a salary cap, and the non-league didn't complete the season. Like clubs like Dover couldn't complete the season in the non-league, and those impacts are still being felt by Dover Athletic today and the non-league today. And we've seen the knock-on financial impacts that the last couple of years have had, and it's a difficult one. And yeah, I mean, they could look at joining the English league system, but then what level do you put them at? How do you equivalate the Welsh league, the Welsh top flight, with the English non-league system or the English league system? How would you slot them in? But yeah, the problem with attendances is not just a football problem in Wales. There are issues within Welsh sport and Welsh sports finances, and that's something that the Welsh FA need to look into. Need to do a feasibility study into. Look at trying to sell the game to a wider audience, and then try and improve the quality of facilities. And if that means they have to ask the English FA for some assistance, there you go. Yeah, theoretically, the New Saints technically are pretty much a team in exile. They don't have a link to a community, which is another part of the problem. They're not tied to a community name, and that could be a problem in attracting fans. Is they're not tied to a community in the sense of a club name. They're just called the New Saints, and that doesn't really tie them into a community of any such, where you can build a community fan base and a catchment area, and it makes it hard for locals to identify with them. Um, uh, So there you go. But eh, questions over like attendance. How does a club improve attendance, or how do you raise average attendances of a league? There needs to be a strategy within the Welsh FA to improve the quality of the domestic game in the Welsh league system. We're having the same argument about Welsh Rugby League and Welsh Rugby Union. There are problems there. Port Vale is an interesting one. I've done my history video on Port Vale, and they're a very interesting club. Saracens and Wasps as well have moved out of London and have dropped the London from their name. So London Wasps and London Saracens were club names, and Wasps and Saracens throughout their history have moved around various stadiums, and now they found permanent homes. But that does sort of hurt how you're trying to sell a brand to a community and get a regional or local fan base to buy it. And Harlequins, for example, but Harlequins have always been based at the Stoop. The Harlequins is another one, but the Harlequins, in the difference to Sarri, it's going to be interesting. Um, yeah, the Welsh league system is unfortunately it doesn't get the attention in the media. I don't know what it's like with the local media in Wales, but it doesn't get discussed alongside the Scottish League or the Northern Irish League, obviously the English. Um, like where they do get some recognition. The Welsh League doesn't seem to get the interest when it comes to the national media. I don't know what it's like with the local media, but the fact that even in Welsh Rugby Union, um, not the provincial, below the provincial level in the Welsh Premiership in rugby union, fan attendances aren't much better than 200-300 a game, and there's massive financial problems. Port Vale, yes, Port Vale is that part of Staffordshire is famous for that's where Robbie Williams comes from. And Port Vale is I think beaten every single club that's ever played in the Football League as well, which is another fact about Port Vale. I don't believe so. No, I don't believe so. No. Port Vale is an interesting club. Overshadowed obviously by Stoke City. They're their nearest rivals, and they're the only club in the English league system not to have a link to a place name. Um, um, but their link is with the towns and villages along the canal, the Staffordshire Canal, which the club is based upon. Um, but no, I think some some clubs do need that kind of celebrity recognition. It's Forest Green Rovers. Yeah, well, Forest Green, I think is the area or whatever. That's still a place name. Forest Green Rovers, though, I can't see them being a sustainable club long term. I really can't. Um, they they really they really just don't have a fan base. Uh, I can't see them being sustainable long term going forwards. And Gloucestershire is not really known as a football mad hotbed, really. Gloucestershire is more known for its rugby union and horse racing. Gloucestershire isn't really known for its footballing support. It's the West Country's rugby union country, so it's already fighting a losing battle in that regard. And I don't like the fact that the owner is obsessed with his vegan left wing politics either, and his supposed green energy company, which actually ranks pretty shitly when it comes to customer satisfaction. Yeah, no, the facility. I mean, look, they are a glorified pub team with money, yes, but I don't think they've got the sustainability long term to really be anything more than a flash in the pan. I can't see them being sustainable enough and and building a fan base. Hashtag United if they somehow get up. the leagues. I have heard that they are the internet team, and they are taking things by storm. Look, anyone can set up a football club, um, and 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 yes, we are in the social media age, and we can discuss social media and sport at length, and the good and the bad. And social media can be, yeah, Rushden is a real place. Rushden and Diamonds were a football team, and they don't exist anymore. Um, anyone can start a football like Solihull Moors. I really appreciate what they've done. And the West Midlands is the heartbeat of English football. If you look back at the founding of the Football League, where the clubs were from, the West Midlands and the North and basically Lancashire, where most of the clubs were from, apart from Derby County. There's nothing against a handful of mates and you know setting up a football club. It's been done. Um, Clubs have split, like FC United of Manchester. That was some disgruntled fans with the Glazers set up a football club. They've been a success in the non-league. They've only been going for what 15, 16 years, and then there's the reasons behind that club being set up. So yeah, anyone can set up a sporting club uh, and take it from scratch as long as they meet the entry requirements to whatever sports league they're entering. Yeah, anyone can set up a team. But I think social media is a key component in 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 trying to sell your products. It, I doubt they make it as far as the professional leagues, and I'm including the National League in there. I don't think they make it that far, and it could be a fad that burns out. Um, it You look at the club histories that I've done, and they are interesting. And obviously, the some you notice with some clubs, especially like East Anglia, they're set up quite late. The Yorkshire clubs so far are generally set up later than the Lancashire clubs for the most part, and that's because a rival sport was already well established in places like Huddersfield and Bradford Rugby League. And then you can flip that on the reverse, like clubs like St Helens, which is based on Merseyside Rugby League, shouldn't exist. It's a football country, shouldn't exist, but it does, and they're a very successful team as well. Um, but the club histories, I mean, I'm surprised with some clubs not winning certain trophies, like Everton, for example, not winning a League Cup. Huddersfield Town, first club to win 3 league titles consecutively. The first club to do a League Cup double was Preston. Um, is 24 the most teams per league you could have in your opinion? In what sport? Are we talking football or in a wider sport? Because there's another YouTube team called Rising Ballers Kensington. They play in the Combined Counties League Division 1. Football. I would say it depends how you do the cup fixtures, and work around that. 24 would be too big if you're playing in the European Cup competitions, quite frankly, with the League Cup and FA Cup. Championship, League One, and League Two, you can get away with it because you're not playing in the European club competitions as well as the League Cup and the Football Cup. It's a difficult one. Even the lower leagues suffer with fixture congestion. I would say currently, I think it would make more sense not to change the number of teams per league. I think we've got that balance reasonably right. I can see allowing the National League in as the fifth division, basically, if we were going by the old Division 1 structure. I would say the National League at some point will become the fifth tier of the Football League, Premier League structure. Um, and we could see some reconfiguration of the divisions. If Man United and Liverpool's plan back in 2020 to shrink the Premier League to 18 teams had come through, that would cause increased pressure on the 3 divisions below. to reconfigure themselves. And the last reconfiguration, I think, was in 1996 when the Premier League shrank from 22 to 20 teams. I would say that would have. I'm not sure all clubs would agree to shrinking leagues down, because then you would have to bring the National League into play as the next division, and then you would have to restructure North and South, National North and South as well, and that just becomes a nightmare then. And then what happens to the Football League Trophy, which is very important for the League One and League Two sides? What happens to how you structure the Football League Cup and the FA Cup? I mean, you would have to completely scrap FA Cup replays entirely. They would have to go completely for the early rounds. And then you would have to look at restructuring European club qualification as well, because you're now forcing the leagues below to restructure, and that's just a nightmare. Um, but it's a handful of clubs that want to throw their weight around, as we saw with the European Super League, the so-called Big Six we have in this country. Tottenham haven't won anything for nearly 20 years, and Tottenham have won less league titles than Blackburn and Huddersfield. Let that sink in. Um, FA Cup replay. I think FA Cup replays are done anyway. I know that they were a temporary reduction because of the COVID pandemic, but look at crowd attendances in the FA Cup even pre-pandemic, they were falling. So I can see that. Um, we'll see what happens. I think the non-league this season will get better because what's going on with the cost of living and the tickets, season tickets, Premier League Club. We'll see what happens. The non-league, I think the running costs for clubs, however, are going to be a massive concern. And if there was to be a restructuring of Championship League One and League Two, I think the rebranding they have, with Championship League One, the naming of the leagues just doesn't work for me. But that's how it is. But if they were to restructure, then some of the weaker clubs in the non-league would have to go down to North and South, and then have to restructure, and it becomes a logistical nightmare. And then there's the financial implications of a club that otherwise would have avoided relegation being put into the league below, and there'll be resistance to that, and there has to be a vote on it. I think it has to be 2/3 majority, and it becomes a bit of a nightmare. The men's US Open tennis. Will Djokovic be playing? That's a big question. And how much do like players like Nadal and Federer and Murray have left in the tank? Could we see a new winner? Um, could this be the beginning of the end of some careers within the game? Um, and the Djokovic situation with what happened with the Australian Open and the vaccine debate, and his visa being cancelled, and the whole hoo-ha around that. It's going to be interesting. I don't know what broadcaster has it. I think it might be Amazon or Sky. I can't remember. To be honest, it doesn't get the viewership figures that Roland Garros and Wimbledon get. They're the ones that really get the viewership figures, because of the time zone and all that. They're seen as possibly the two marquee out of the Grand Slams. They're the ones you want to win. Roland Garros and Wimbledon. I can't see. Um, the US Open doesn't do it. Tennis doesn't really do it for me anymore. I haven't really been watching tennis as rigorously as I used to. Um, there's a lot of sports where I'm just not. I don't know. Feeling is the word. I just don't feel the attachment that I used to. Tennis is one of those sports where I've lost that attachment. Where I used to be, really enjoyed watching it. Now, not so much. Not so much these days. I've lost that attachment and that enjoyment for watching the sport. Australia the weakest slam. I think Australia is possibly, and I think the way that things were handled at the beginning of the year in regards to players meeting the requirements over vaccines and all that could have been handled a lot better. I think that did definitely damage the image of the sport, and the image of that tournament. It but I think, yeah, the Australian Open just has it. Tennis. I think has lost a little bit for me. Um, it has definitely lost um, some of the excitement. I think it's partly because a handful of players have basically dominated the men's singles side of the sport for so long. And while they are great players, great champions, yeah, the PGA Tour. Well, look, the PGA Tour and the LIV Tour, obviously, that's becoming a big negative, divisive distraction for golf. We've been here before in regards with rugby league, ice hockey, cricket since the 70s, where a rival league gets set up and ultimately fails. I think that's what's going to happen with this LIV golf. I think with what's going on financially in the world, with the cost of living and prices going up, and some of the obscene money being thrown around, and of course then the TV rights debate. I can see it being more damaging for golf than you know growth. Um, and yeah, the TV rights, yeah, the Augusta Masters. That was 4 days of just I could just relax and in the cold winter months watch the Masters. That was religious viewing in my family. And yeah, the BBC with their sporting strategy a long time ago, bearing in mind this is well before COVID. Yeah, decided with their sporting strategy to give up on it. And I think golf doesn't really have enough um, players who really connect with a younger audience. It is a sport with an older fan base, much like baseball, for example. Cricket's finding out that if you reduce the accessibility of a sport, your fan base shrinks. But I think golf is paying the price um, for some of its decisions made with media rights and the organisation of the sport. It is paying the price. Um, well, the issues with the Premier League in '92 and the promises we were given 30 years ago haven't come true. Um, I mean, the Football League had a really bad relationship with a lot of clubs, and there was a breakdown in trust between the governing bodies in the FA and the Football League and some of the biggest clubs in the game. And I have no doubt that the European Super League was quite similar. Um, for fans, nothing much really changed. You still go and watch your local club play, your team play. I think what helped the Premier League was we had the class of '92 with Man United. We had the Blackburn Rovers story under the late Jack Walker, and then we had obviously that Newcastle United side. And suddenly, yes, we had a domestic league that was exciting to sell overseas. Um, and compete against Serie A. That 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 was a proper, you know, PR battle, quite frankly. And the difference between the Premier League and Serie A was Serie A had actually gained from free to air TV. That's why it was more popular in the '90s. Um, yeah, I remember Grandstand. I used to watch that religiously in the mornings. But that format of a multi-sports program, a multi-sport program, not multi-sports program, but having multiple sports, it was good for its day. And if the BBC Red Button was around when Grandstand was on, you could just have Grandstand or just the BBC Sport as a channel network. Red Button. It might work in today's media format where you could just go on the internet and you could have Grandstand with the main presenter and you could have the multi feed options. It could work. Um, But it is what it is. My favourite memory of watching the Masters, Greg Norman choking it because I watched that entire Masters. That's the first Masters I actually remember was the Greg Norman one we didn't win and Nick Faldo did. It's back in '95, and right now Greg Norman is obviously with his LIV Golf and the Saudi backed tournament idea, and Nick Faldo designing golf courses that, guess what, the LIV Golf are playing on and the PGA are playing on is ridiculous. I think he was 95. Um, but yeah, Greg Norman, the Shark, um, great player, but as a golfing kind of administrator or sales pitch, it's becoming more divisive. It's becoming more negative than positive, and therefore it's doing more damage to the reputation of the sport, which it doesn't need. It's got enough golfers having extramarital affairs and not being particularly nice individuals. It doesn't need more negative publicity, really. It's becoming a very divisive topic at a time where the average sportsman or the average person just doesn't have the money in their pocket to fork out on tickets to this situation. Do I think a Premier League breakaway from the EFL would happen today? Um, that's an interesting question. With the state of the game, it's possible that the Premier League and the EFL could merge back together. Quite frankly, I think there needs to be just one league structure where it's all governed by one governing body. Um, I think with the situation as things are right now, I think the clubs have got too powerful, and the Premier League and the EFL are very weak organisations when it comes to governance. I think the FA has been pretty toothless as well, which um, has allowed the situation to get to this European Super League idea that got floated and yeah. Um, this is ultimately led to the fan-led review because I think greed has definitely destroyed the game, whereas before it was lack of investment was destroying the game and crumbling infrastructure. Now it's pure greed um, and bad ownership. Yeah, I can see Blackburn going back to the Premier League at some point. Yes. When did Serie A? That was back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and then the mid to late 2000s. It was on Channel 5 as well. So it's had two stints on British TV. It was on Channel 4 for a good 15 years, and then it was on Channel 5 for a good 3 years. Um, that was a brilliant league to watch. Um, no, I don't think the top 20 British clubs plus the 20 from Europe, because I don't think fans have already said they will not support it. Fans have said they will not support it. Can you imagine, for example, you take Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund out of Germany, you've just killed German football. Um, you, Imagine if you took Olympiakos or Panathinaikos, one of the Greek clubs, out of Greek football, you killed it. They can be as greedy as they want. What has been summed up in the last 18 months to 2.5 years? And I think the Barcelona situation predates COVID. They still haven't played Bordeaux for what's the player's name? Oh, this is going to annoy me now. They Bordeaux sold a player to Barcelona back in 2019. They've not received a penny for the player, and that predates COVID. So the Barcelona money issues have been exposed because of the last 2.5 years. Have actually been going on for a hell of a lot longer. Um, I think the only reason it happened back then is I think yeah no I can't if if they try the European Super League again, look what the Man United fans did the other night before the Liverpool match. Um, um, no, Euro Premier League is not inevitable. It's quite. I think it's less likely now than it ever has been. Look, fans have basically said they will not support it. Fans have said they will not support it, and that tells you all you need to know. If you cannot get your customer base on side for your product, you'll never be able. It'll never work. It'll collapse. And breakaway leagues always fail. Always fail. As in, you set up a rival league system. The Premier League was always part of the football pyramid. It was never like we're going to ring fence this. It's always going to be part of the divisional pyramid in the English game. It's going to rebrand the top division. That was it. Um, What sport is most attended by celebrities in the UK? Um, there are a lot of celebrities who tie themselves to their favourite football club. We've seen a lot of celebrities at the cricket at Test match special, trying to get their 5 minutes on the radio to talk drivel. Most of them are vacuous. And Lily Allen talking cricket is the most painful thing. She just comes across as a complete and utter dim, dim woman. Um, Champagne socialist, I think is the term I would like to call Lily Allen, but she's a crackhead. What I'm going to say on that one. Cricket, football. Very few celebrities seem to be at the rugby or the rugby league. Um, Horse racing's another one where they come out, but it's mostly football and cricket. They have their social media account and they say I'm at Test match special, I'm on Test match, I'm at the Test match, or I'm at this game or that game, and they just add to the plastic fandom. Like, no, just please stop. Some actually quite famous people actually generally do go to their local club week in week out. That's the fantastic thing about it. Robbie Williams is actually a Port Vale fan, and Prince William is an Aston Villa fan. Who knew? Um, I don't think a EuroLeague will work. The fans have said they're not going to support it, and the fact they couldn't get the German clubs on side with their history, the German league. I know it's the Bayern's dominated Bundesliga for the last decade, but if you can't get the two biggest German clubs on side, and in fact all German clubs resoundingly said if we were invited we would decline. The fact they couldn't get PSG involved with just their infinite cash, just tell, and the fan response was just brutal. They completely miscalculated the feeling. Look, it's when Barcelona and Girona tried to take regular season games to the US, and the fans went no. Fans actually went no. They went that's a step too far. It won't work. The people in the club boards think it will because they're just seeing pound, euro, dollar signs, or kroner if you're from Sweden and Denmark. Um, but in reality, or zloty if you're from Poland, they saw the cash signs. They didn't realise that here's the thing: the fans are your customer base, and even fans in North America are like, no, we like the traditions of the European game. We like the history of the European game, which is something the US game lacks. Um, and look, if you can't get your fans on side and you're obsessing about the Asian market, which by the way, match fixing in Asia is ridiculous, so it might as well become a fixed league. It wouldn't work. Um, would I watch it? No, I wouldn't watch European Super League. I wouldn't watch. I wouldn't watch it even if the drugs and the women were free. There you go. No. You could offer me anything you wanted, right? Like a lifetime supply of Heinz ravioli, which is my favourite tinned food, by the way, or foods with the alphabet spaghetti. Yeah, I'm a overgrown child. You could offer me my favourite food. You could offer me like a mansion to live in for a year while I look for another place to live. Anything, I still wouldn't watch it. You could offer me as much money as you wanted, wouldn't watch it. You couldn't pay me to watch it because yes, sport is a business, but you've got to remember the 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 community aspect, and when you're taking that community aspect out, yeah, the corporate wankers want it. But guess what? If we don't buy the products, it looks really crap when you're trying to buy or sell a TV deal with empty stands everywhere. It looks really bad when you're trying to sell a product. The local fans don't want it. Okay, you couldn't pay them to go see it, and then you've got empty stands with the corporate sat in there with an 85% empty stadium. That's going to look really shit for your TV deal or your internet streaming service. It's going to look really crap. Um, and yeah, that's what's going to hit them is the public image of, well, we've sold plastic. The fans don't want it, and if you can't get your repeat customers, that's the best way to describe it. Your repeat customers interested in a product, your returning customers, if they're going to go no, You then have a problem with your brand image and selling that product, to a wider audience. If you can't get your hardcore supporters of a product on board, you ain't going to attract any fans long term. Just saying, if you cannot, I think what we've seen during COVID and just before was there was definitely a turning point. Definitely a turning point. And I think the FIFA scandal has definitely been a turning point. And fans have argued we've lost our community spirit of our club. It's become a rich man's sport. We can't afford to go. So already there's been pushback. We've seen protests against ticket price, and we've seen protests about away ticket prices. We've seen protests about all sorts, all sorts. It's Atalanta in the city of Bergamo in Lombardy near Milan in Italy. They La Dea. What's the club's nickname? La Dea. Um, their club logo is based off Diana, the goddess of the Nike, one of Nike, the goddess Nike's huntresses. So she's a demigod in Greek Greco-Roman mythology, and her backstory is really depressing because she dies in the end, and then she goes up to Mount Olympus. Diana the Huntress, the story of the Huntress, that's the club logo. That's why they've got a Greco-Roman helmeted warrior's female head. She's one of those Amazon warriors. Yeah, La Dea. They're my favourite Italian club. I'm sorry, they are. And Christian Vieri played for them at one point. So, you know. It's not just that they get a free jersey. They get, like, for the first 6 months of the baby's life, the family gets financial support from the club, and they get loads of free stuff like baby food and baby grows and all sorts. Um, so the club is really, you know, uh, yeah, very community based there. Five football stadiums I would bring back: Main Road, the Dell, Highfield Road, Filbert Street, and Ayresome Park. Yeah, I think the FIFA scandal, yeah, definitely. I think that definitely has um, changed perceptions. It's damaged the brand, and with the World Cup being in Qatar still after that scandal, has definitely damaged the reputation of the organisation. I think irreparably. And then you find out that beIN Sports and PSG, that Qatari money as well, and some conflicts of interest in regards to the ownership of PSG and the TV company and the Qatari government. Um, yeah, there's. I think that scandal has done a lot to, well, some fans were naive, thinking everything was all and well, but it's not. And I think there's been so many corruption scandals coming out of the game before the FIFA scandal. You know that there's a broken system in place, and that's where the fans have gone. You look at fans across Europe, and they don't like UEFA. They regularly call out UEFA in regards to the greed of UEFA and how the European club game is structured and the UEFA coefficient. And there is a definite there's no love lost between fans and UEFA. That's almost universal. Um, there's a lot of pressure. This World Cup is going to be the litmus test, and I think a turning point in the direction of the global game. Um, if you were a world class football player born in San Marino but could represent Italy, what would you do? Uh, that is a tough one. The marketing coup that you could have in the San Marino's FA to gain attention on it could be fantastic. It all depends on the choices made by the player and of course individual circumstance, because we see this in rugby union, we see this in rugby league, we see this in a lot of other sports where you were born in a country but can represent another country. The Pellini brothers, one of the Pellini brothers represents Canada in ice hockey. The other one represents Great Britain. They were both born in Guildford, which is not too far from me. Um, and again, it's about personal choice. If you're a dual national, again, it's about which team snaps you up first or gives you interest first. But I think Italy would be highly likely to snap them up first. Um, do you think FIFA could be under pressure at the Qatar World Cup? Yeah, they're under pressure anyway. In regards to avoiding the World Cup to Qatar, I think it's going to be safe to say the stadium's pretty empty, quite frankly. I don't know what the ticket prices are. There's not enough hotel space for all the fans anyway that are predicted to go. That they're predicted to go. I don't know what ticket sales have been like. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic and the restructuring of the footballing calendar to accommodate this World Cup, and basically the World Cup final should be played by now on a normal cycle. Um, yeah, FIFA has been under pressure long before what actually came out in 2015. As soon as that World Cup was awarded, eyebrows were raised. Um, and yeah, I we'll see what happens. Do fans prefer the Champions League? There's a division on that. I think the dead rub is in the group stage. The fact that the third place teams in the groups go down to the Europa League devalues the next competition below, and vice versa for the Europa Conference League, which should be the Cup Winners' Cup. Let's not go back to. Look, I've argued for a return to the old format, and I've argued against the current UEFA coefficient, which actually benefits, as I say, a handful of leagues over others. Um, I think the current format, the fans have already said that the proposed new replacement format is even worse than the current one, which they're divided on. Um, and I think rightly so. There's some division on the current format in its structure. Same for all the European competitions. To be fair, there is fans aren't necessarily over enamoured with the current format, but then you just get used to it as a normal, and then you sort of begrudgingly accept because apparently fans have no say in the running of the game. Then the European Super League and how fans stood up to the clubs and made their voice heard. Fans need to make their voice heard. It proves that hey, if fans start boycotting these competitions and protesting outside their clubs and leaving lots of empty seats, it does look really bad for TV packages being sold. Could this be the worst World Cup ever? Yeah, I think so. I think it could be in living memory. Yes, I think South Africa wasn't a bad World Cup. To be fair, it had the lowest goals per game average um, uh, of a modern World Cup. But you know, the South Africans were great hosts. The quality of football, I think, wasn't the best, and there's lots of circumstances around that. But no, Qatar's going to be crap. I really, I have my reservations. I do. Um, Yeah, look, when Sepp Blatter said it, he knew well before that award ceremony what was happening. The paper bugs had already been paid. Let's just say the brown paper bags had been paid. Um, like the, I mean, I wasn't overly keen on Russia either, but that World Cup was fantastic. What's happened since then is clearly Putin was sports washing for a good decade before his invasion of Ukraine. Um, just replicating what the Chinese Communist Party did in the Beijing Winter and Summer Olympics, and what the German Nazis did and the Italians did with the Football World Cups before World War Two. But no, the Qatar one was just an absolute farcical joke, and let's be honest. Um, I think this is where I think sport, especially football, there's a lot of problems and they're not being properly addressed, and fans quite rightly are very sceptical of anything now. The naivety of a lot of fans is gone, and the anger of fans is growing. There's definitely a frustration um, within fandom of the sport that's been building and building and building. and it's reached a point now where fans are more organised, and that's the social media side of things. They're organised, they're frustrated, and they have reasons to be. And the last World Cup, we had dead rubbers like Iran versus Morocco, Serbia versus Costa Rica, and Panama versus Tunisia. Imagine Laos versus St Kitts and Nevis. We won't. It won't get to that kind of fight. They look. Those kind of nations will not qualify for the World Cup. Um, they those kind of nations will not make it to the World Cup. But I think they're going to expand African qualifying and Asian qualifying. I think that's part of the premise of expanding the World Cup is they're going to expand African and Asian qualifying because they are growing markets for the global game financially and for fans and for the corporate dollar is the best way to describe it. And I think the expanded 48 team format for the next World Cup is, I think, an expanded qualification format for Asia and for Africa. I think. Uh, there already is an international um, uh, mini Olympics for those smaller nations that have less than 1 million people. It already exists for all sports. So that concept is already there. But some nations have massively improved anyway for small population size. So nations like Montenegro have massively improved. Luxembourg have gone up the world rankings massively. Liechtenstein have gone up the world rankings massively. It's just a handful of nations that have struggled, but that concept is not a new idea. Iceland, Iceland, would wipe the floor with some of these nations, and it would be therefore wouldn't really be minnows because you've got to look at within the global game the successes and failures of things. And yeah, there are certain nations like Montenegro and Iceland that would just be in the final every time, and that's not good. How did China and India have such massive populations, but they can't find 11 decent footballers to throw on the field? Because it's not their national sport, and the Chinese league is fixed to hell, and India it's cricket and field hockey, and the Indian FA have been suspended by FIFA, so and have had their under 17s World Cup hosting or under 19s, suspended and all that. Because they're not the national sports. China is a weird one. China really is a weird one. They're a big consumer of all these various global sports, but they're not an international sporting powerhouse outside of the Olympics. But they do consume a lot of um, our uh, Western sports professional leagues. They do consume a lot. They do buy a lot of merchandise. There is Chinese money within um, professional sports and leagues around the world, for good or for ill. Um, Whether that's a good thing or bad, I don't know. India, it's cricket and field hockey are the two most popular sports by some margin. A big margin, actually, to be fair. Um, and while you could say Indian culture frowns upon contact sports, yes and no. I think India wants to progress in a lot of sports and to be a global player outside of just cricket, field hockey, and they've got the population base to do it. But the difference being, Indians are obsessed with, again, much like China, with sports other than cricket and field hockey. The issue is, especially with these two countries, is match fixing and corruption is endemic in sport. It's endemic. It's ridiculous. And it's rife. The amount of match fixing allegations that go link back to India and China, in a multitude of international sports and club sports. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Would I like to see a World Cup in the UK? Look, I've seen Rugby League World Cups, I've seen Rugby Union World Cups, I've seen Cricket World Cups. Would I like to see a football World Cup? Absolutely. We've got a Rugby League World Cup literally in a month and a half's time kicking off, literally in 7 weeks. And, you know, while it's Rugby League and it's not as big as Rugby Union or cricket or football, we've got a World Cup. And I think it's the third World Cup we've hosted in my lifetime in rugby league, in this country. So, uh, I mean, there you go. I mean, a football World Cup would be a fantastic thing to have, but I think with the state of the sport and yeah, the state of the country and a lot of the issues, it's. I think taking the game to new locations that haven't hosted it before and 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 building, you know, and improving on. I think it's good to go to new countries which haven't hosted a tournament. I'm still surprised such a big global game. The low level development must be abysmal because even at decent, I feel like it's overrated. No, in India, it's just not culturally a thing. It is very interesting. You know, it's the same in China. I mean, the Chinese Super League is one of the most, if not the most, corrupt league for match fixing. The crowd attendances are abysmal. The match fixing allegations are just all over the place. But cricket and field hockey are so well promoted in India and well supported. The corporate money's involved in it. Um, every state's got a cricket team. Every state's got a hockey team. Um, it completely it's got so many obstacles to overcome. If India or China were serious about football, would they dominate? Population size doesn't necessarily mean quality. Quantity does not mean quality. Um, and and the amount of corruption within the Chinese and Indian with the illegal gambling syndicates, because gambling is illegal in China and India in certain states under certain jurisdictions. The only places you can gamble are Macau and Hong Kong. I think Shanghai might have some casinos, but there's very limited jurisdictions within China and India where gambling is permitted. And therefore, illegal gambling, where the criminal gangs, um, that is something that is really holding China and India back in a whole host of sports. And it's seeped into Indian cricket, field hockey. It's seeped into just throughout Chinese sport, and then further afield across Asia. And then no, quantity doesn't necessarily give you a better chance of quality. Um, it really doesn't. Um, Mass-produced shit is generally lower quality than handcrafted. Not gonna lie. Trust me, as someone who trained as a mechanic, mass-produced cars now are so much lower in craftsmanship and quality than something that's hand-built. Same with motorcycles, same with anything. Things are not built to last these days. And when you're trying to produce this like generic production line, the fact that the Chinese league is so fixed that fans have switched off, and the criminal gangs have now gone. Let's okay, we fixed our league to death. We can't fix it anymore because the results are getting so ridiculous. Well, we'll try and fix someone else's league. Tell you what you need to know about the sporting culture within China. It's so corrupt. It's not even funny. It's quite depressing. And you want them to be global players in the game? Absolutely not. India, sport in India is so corrupt. Um, that I mean, that's how the Hansi Cronje match fixing scandal came to light. They were actually investigating an organised criminal group and stumbled across it by accident. Exactly. Look at these Teslas with lithium batteries that only last 5 years. Yeah, and lithium is a toxic substance and is actually more toxic to dig out the ground and dispose of than just drilling crude oil. Who knew? But don't tell the eco-mentalists that. They cannot accept that open cast lithium mining is a bad thing, because it really is, and we have a limited supply and just toxic as hell. The cleanup required. Just don't get me started on lithium mining. It's horrible. But the left wing neoliberal eco mentalists who want to make us all go vegan and hug trees, yeah, they haven't seen an open cast lithium mine. I would like to shove them in one, to be fair. So you want your lithium? Dig that out there. Oh, by the way, your lungs are going to turn to shit. You'll get cancer. You'll become infertile, and you'll go blind. And then the cobalt mining as well. That's even more toxic. But they can't accept this. Um, Montserrat is the smallest FIFA member. I believe so. Maybe Gibraltar. Gibraltar's now a FIFA member. Um, Montserrat could be, population wise. Bear in mind, most of the population of Montserrat got evacuated because of a volcanic eruption. So, population is like a tenth of what it was pre eruption. I think 65% of the island is now uninhabitable. Well, yeah, we're talking about people, not car parks. The more people are born, the more person you potentially become a pro hypothetical. Yeah, but sport in China is very tightly controlled by the Chinese Communists, the Chinese Communist Party, and hence the Olympics. There are actual schools, there are actual sports schools where the kids learn nothing but rigid sports discipline, and it's not pleasant. Some of and China very state controlled, very brutalist, single party dictatorship. And yes, we could discuss China on the other channel and the state of politics right now. And I try not to. I haven't done a live stream. I did a live stream on the other channel a while ago, and it was just I didn't enjoy doing it as much. If that makes sense. But I could do some more videos for the other channel. I think I must actually. That's on the to do list. I've booked a week. I've put an application for some time off work for a week, so I might do some. If I get it, I might do some more. Um, more content. Um, there is a lot to talk about. Yes, I could get quite passionate about how I would fix the cost of living crisis. One, I would cut VAT to historic lows. Two, I would. You want to reduce tax? Okay. Yeah, VAT. I think is the big one you can cut. I think you would. I would definitely cut beer duty because pubs are going out of business. I think that the nighttime economy is screwed. The hospitality economy. I would cut VAT, which would actually benefit small medium sized businesses as well. Also, I have done a Rugby League World Cup preview. It's on the channel, already up on the channel. Must be annoying being a continental member, not a FIFA member. Yes and no. It depends on what each member association, how they feel that they, is it within their infrastructural remit? Are they competitive enough? There's a lot of reasons why you may just be a continental member only or not a FIFA member. Um, and yeah, that has to be frustrating for some, but at the same time, there are reasons why some nations are only continental members, not full FIFA members, and why others are still not fully recognised. No, I've got guest membership, and there's all sorts of subplots that we're not privy to in regards to how much money does the organisation have, like does the association have, how much infrastructure's in place, um, you know where things are at in regards to player development, player depth. Do we have enough player depth to call upon players to play at that level? That kind of thing is there's a whole host of criteria that need to be met to become a full FIFA member as well. Um, and there's financial criteria, there's player based criteria, there's a whole host of things that need to be met before you can go that far. Because again, um, because Gibraltar is an overseas territory, Jersey's a crown dependency. Um, they could, yes, they could all technically, in theory, apply for. They're not even UEFA members, so and technically French Guiana could be a UEFA member as well. But French Guiana is technically classed as a department of France. It's not actually classed as a colony. They're classed as overseas department, which is a political designation within France. So they actually vote for French presidential elections. So therefore, they're not classed as members for FIFA reasons. But I have done a Rugby League World Cup preview. I've done that. It's up on the channel in the Rugby League playlist. I will try and cover as many Rugby League World Cup matches as I can. I'm not going to say that's going to be easy due to work commitments, but I'll try and do as best I can with the Rugby League World Cup. But we'll see what happens in regards to that. How is Gibraltar? It's Gibraltar's classed as an overseas territory, whereas Jersey and Guernsey are the Channel Islands, and their crown dependency. They're to do with their political designation and stuff. Will AS Monaco ever run into legal issues while not actually being the French border? Half the stadium is actually in France, and there's a special arrangement between Monaco and the French government, so never going to be a problem. Half their stadium is actually in France, and there's a train station underneath as well. It's half in France. Suriname, Guyana, and French Guyana are South America playing CONCACAF, and technically French Guyana is technically part of France, special designation. Yeah, no, Suriname and Guyana, yeah, been playing CONCACAF for quite some time. They see themselves as Caribbean nations rather than South American nations in culture. Could we see a Monaco national team? It's possible. It is possible. We could. In theory, yes. Reality, probably not. Oh yeah, AS Monaco. I've got to do. I might do a club history on AS Monaco. Actually, they're quite an interesting club to look at. They did get to a Champions League final back in the day. I do remember with Ludovic Julie and on the wing, and Thierry Henry used to play for the club. Arsene Wenger used to manage the club. They've had some world class players play for them. I'll have to do a history on AS Monaco. Be interesting. It would be interesting. They have won French league titles. They've got the stadium used to host the European Super Cup every at the start of every season. They are the Stade Louis. Yeah, they're a very interesting club. They've got a great history, and they are one of the unique clubs in a sense, but they're not. If that makes sense, they are unique, but they're not unique at the same time. I've heard that Monaco are considering forming a professional rugby team to go with their football team and basketball. Yeah, well, a lot of Europe clubs in Europe are multi-sports clubs, and that would they tried it with PSG with a rugby league team and it failed. So it does come with a word of caution, and they're not in traditional rugby union or rugby league country in France. They're in the south. Technically, they're in the southeast, which historically it's more the southwest and south central. That's more necessary to have rugby players. But it's worth a shot. They've definitely got the infrastructure in place, and the climate's pretty good in Monaco. It's got a coastal maritime alpine kind of climate, so it's not too bad. I think it's doable. It is doable. But PSG tried it with a rugby league team in the 90s, and that catastrophically failed quite badly. So it's been tried and failed before. Um, we'll have to see. I mean, if they're considering it, I think it's something that that they could consider. Absolutely. Whether it pays off or not is another thing. I'm surprised Monaco doesn't have a national side. Athletics-wise, it's Charles and Arthur Leclerc. Um, no, Prince Albert, the current head of state, used to do the bobsleigh at the Olympics. Um, uh, that that that. So yeah, their current head of state actually is a former Olympic bobsledder. So, but no, Monaco's an interesting little country, and yes, AS Monaco is a very, very interesting club with a very interesting and fun history. Um, that is definitely worth looking at. And they've had some fantastic players play for them, and they've had success, and they've been to a Champions League final. They are a very, very interesting club historically, and I think they're a very unique club, as in their stadium is technically in two countries. And they are the only club within the country they are from as well, which is very, very interesting. Well, Chile's Rugby World Cup qualification. The game's already massively improved anyway in Chile. I think it could be a massive boost to the game, not just in Chile, but in wider South America outside of Argentina and Uruguay, I think. And it's definitely a massive boost for them. They are making their debut. I think they'll be of a similar quality to what Portugal were in 2007, if not a little bit better. Um, I think it's a bigger blow for the US not getting over the line um, at the first attempt. They've got to do it by the repechage tournament, which is something um, which is another unnecessary hurdle that the US have got themselves into by underperforming against their opposition. That's the new Chester FC. The original stadium wasn't in two countries. The current one is. But I think the Stade Louis is actually the first stadium to be in two countries, and it's the only club in their own country. Whereas, you know, I, I think it's an iconic stadium for the fact of it hosting the European Super Cup many. Uh, Again, the rugby Europe Super Cup, where they've got the tier two nations playing, is a fair concept considering you've got the United Rugby Championship, the tier one nations, and it. But club rugby union's got problems at the moment with Worcester Warriors and Wasps, especially Worcester, but also Wasps facing severe financial difficulties and other unnamed Premiership clubs in money problems, and one of the Bristol clubs in the lower levels going bust this morning. There are, I think, there are concerns within the current structures of the club game of money problems, massive money problems. I was discussing it at work. Yes, the Six Nations is always the same six. You play each other once. It's 5 games, 5 rounds of matches. It was the Five Nations, and before that, it was the Four Nations, which was England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. It goes back to before Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland were separated. Hence why Northern Ireland and Ireland share the same national side. France then came in about 1908, and then Italy came in 2000. It's the same with the rugby championship involving South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and obviously now Argentina. It used to be the Tri Nations, which is the Southern Hemisphere equivalent. Um, it's just how rugby union is organised. Then you have the tier two nation competitions, um, and it's basically how international rugby union has been organised since the amateur days, pre 1995. Um, and it's and then you have obviously the Lions tour as well. I think yes, one pair of the goalposts is in Wales, or part of one of the goalposts. Chester FC. Look, Chester FC. I mean, look, it used to be Chester City back in the day. Yeah, the club has gone bust and reformed. The stadium became an issue during COVID, during the lockdowns, and then there were concerns that Chester could go under yet again. They obviously been relegated out of the Football League quite some time ago. It's their stadium is an absolute mess. Real Bedford FC. I mean, some of these clubs have got some stupid names, haven't they? And Bedford's a rugby town as well, so I can't see that working. Do I think Hong Kong could ever reach a Rugby World Cup? It's possible. It is possible. But we'll see. Yeah, I don't think Chester would like to be a class as a Welsh club, considering their rivalries with like Crewe and things like that. And they wouldn't. And then the Welsh league is, as we've discussed earlier, just not strong enough financially. With a club that's had financial problems in the past, it would be a really bad move for Chester to go play in the Welsh league system. There isn't the money there, and this is a club that's nearly gone bust during the COVID period, and has gone bust before. That would be quite a big risk to take financially. I just don't think Chester could afford, and I don't think the fans would want to have uh, them playing in the Welsh system. Not at all. Fans wouldn't support it. Um, so and I mean, whoever was on the planning count for the local authorities to build the stadium where it is pretty thick, to be honest. Would be good if Welsh League had Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, Wrexham, Chester, Shrewsbury, and Hereford. Danny Murphy is from Chester. Admitted he was brought up to hate the Welsh. Got to show show the wrong. Yeah, there's definitely North Wales is where football is most popular, and a lot of North Welsh fans obviously gravitate to Wrexham, but also to clubs like Tranmere and Chester, ironically, because they're just across the Dee and the Dee River. But North Wales doesn't really have a professional sports team. It is quite literally Wrexham, um, and and Cheshire, other than Chester, I think Crewe's in Cheshire as well. Actually, is Warrington. It's rugby league country, and and Cheshire is not really known as a sporting hotbed. So a lot of football players do live in Cheshire, um, but Cheshire isn't really known as a sporting hotbed of a county, really. But no, Danny Murphy, yeah, has spoken of being brought up to hate is a strong word, but dislike the Welsh. If Wales go independent, well, Wales is nowhere close to independence yet. To be fair, I don't think either Scotland. Too much money involved, it would cause financial issues. Swansea, Cardiff, if that was a Premier League fixture again, that'll make a lot of money. That's a big rivalry. It's a heated rivalry. It does attract a lot of attention in the national media. it would be ruinous for the Welsh game, but it might actually ironically improve the quality of the Welsh league. But I can't see it happening. Um, can't see it happening. Hmm. But we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Um, Whoever says anything about Crew, um, Crew Alexandra, another very interesting club with a great youth system and a great history with their youth production of players through the Crew system. Do you think it's right? Well, it's sort of. I've grown up with it. Um, those clubs chose to go into the English league system. The English league system accepted them, and they've been an asset to the English game of Cardiff and Swansea. They've won silverware and they've won the FA Cup and League Cup between them. They've been an asset to um, the English league system since they've been in it. They've both been Premier League clubs. They've both won silverware. Um, the the clubs don't want to go into the Welsh league system. They never had any. They've never you know, been interested in going into the Welsh league system. They've been part of the English league structure for a very long time, and they have no inclination of leaving that league structure. So make of that what you will. Same with Wrexham, same with Newport. They've been involved with the English league structure from you know their first beginnings. They have no interest in leaving the league structure that's benefited them. So I mean, it would be a massive boost to have like Cardiff and Swansea obviously go into the Welsh league system. Absolutely. But then it will end up like the old firm in Scotland. It'll become an even less competitive league system than it currently um, is there a talent shortage in Irish football at the moment, or is this about average for them? I think rugby union is now really the driving Irish sport right now. And of course, you've got the Gaelic Amateur Association sports like hurling and Gaelic football. And the interesting thing is the urban games in the town, cities in Ireland, so like places like Dublin and Waterford and Cork and Limerick. Rugby union is now the dominant sport because Ireland are ranked number one in the world in rugby union. Football, they've always seemed to unearth talent, be it native Irish players or second or third generation immigrants or children of immigrants in England or Scotland who are eligible through parentage uh, over the years. They've always seemed to dig up a player who speaks with a Lancastrian accent or a Scouse accent or a Scottish accent who's eligible to play for them. The FIA, the FAI, the Football Association of Ireland, has money problems. The Declan Rice situation a couple of years ago, where he flipped between being an Irish player and an English player before the Euros. Um, I think damaged the FAI quite badly. They, I wouldn't say they've got a talent shortage. I think rugby union has now become the more dominant sport nationally, where they are a recognised world leader in sport. Um, and of course, then you've got the Gaelic Amateur Association, which is hurling and Gaelic football. Gaelic football is a little bit like AFL, and hurling is a little bit like lacrosse, yet with even more violence. Hurling is proper violent, and they're amateur. So in theory, they don't get paid for their services. In reality, it's like rugby union pre '95, 5 6 years before rugby union actually officially went professional. But the Gaelic Amateur Association, I've got to do a video on the GAA and the history of it and the importance. Probably get it all horribly wrong and be lynched by an angry Irish mob, but I've got Irish heritage, so I think it's right that I look at um, things. I wouldn't say all the. I think The situation is the FAI with the Mick McCarthy situation a couple of years ago was handled very badly. It impacted them heavily financially, and then the Declan Rice situation became farcical. Um, and there are money issues within the Football Association of Ireland and within the game in Ireland. I think I wouldn't say that they're the rejects. Actually, I think that's soccer or football is Ireland's third footballing code. That is correct. Rugby union and Gaelic football are the two big ones. Um, and the United Ireland Football Association might be more successful if it was where I am, which it probably wouldn't be. And you're probably correct there as well, but it, would, it wouldn't work. Um, could the Keanes play? But Robbie and Roy Keane, they're very Irish. No, there's no hope. They're very, very, very Irish. Um, Irish parents, Irish born and bred, wouldn't happen. Um, there are other Keanes who currently play, and some of them in theory could, but they've selected to play. Selection rules for Ireland are a bit of a mess. It's good for the FA to give Welsh clubs a chance. Would a United Ireland football team? There'll be too much politics behind that for that to work. When six countries can come together and create a better national side, when six counties can come together and create a better national side, that tells you something. Yeah, I think that does tell you something in both the men's and women's games. Obviously, because the women qualified for the Euros for the first time. That is quite telling. Yes, you could argue that. Um, um, that is quite a striking point, and that is a fair point. I think there are major issues within the FAI, and there are some long-standing issues that need to be looked at. I think the way they handled rehiring Mick McCarthy and then sacking Mick McCarthy, the state of the team right now, they are going through a very, by Irish standards, a lean spell. It's a difficult one. I don't think there's a lack of players wanting to play the game and get scouted by bigger clubs in England and Scotland, for example. Um, I think it's more the governance side and the finances of the game, and I would say governance and bad governance. And I think what the COVID pandemic has highlighted, and even in the build up to the COVID pandemic, so in recent years, um, certain things have been highlighted, and then poor governance is one of them. And it is what it is. The question mark over the politics side is something for the other channel. It gets complicated with sport in Ireland. It does complicate things on a sporting level, but it's more a topic for the other channel, and it's a very complicated topic, and there's a lot behind it, and it actually it could have been solved just on the eve of World War One with the counties of Tyrone and Fermanagh, which is Gaelic Amateur Association country as well, by the way, or bandit country according to the Gardaí and the British military in the 80s. Um, Tyrone and Fermanagh, if they had sorted out their borders and county alignments, we may have averted in the next century almost of political upheaval. But there you go. Yeah, and ice hockey as well. The Belfast Giants are part of the British ice hockey system. Um, yeah, when it comes to most sports, yes, there's a lot of politics involved with Irish sport that I think hold it back, which is unfortunate. Um, but it is what it is. But in regards to their footballing program and the Football Association of Ireland, there are some bigger questions. That is correct. That is the channel. I haven't put any content up there for a few months. I've got to do some book reviews. Book reviews actually. Got to do some other stuff. I've got some films I need to do reviews for as well. Um, But yeah, the other channel I do history videos. I discuss about. Yeah, well, I've done like history videos in regards to communities I've worked in and lived in, and some fun facts. I thought I've looked at some very important historical figures. Royalty is another one. I've done a list of the kings of England up to Henry the Third. I think I've got to. Um, so that's I've got to there, and I've stalled a little bit. Was it Henry the Second? I can't remember now. Yeah, it's Henry the Third because I'm about to do Edward the First. And that some of those video researching can take a long time for them. They can take hours, hours. And I used to get the whiteboard out, and that just yeah, they are lengthy research ones, and therefore they take a long time. And when I screw up a take, it's so frustrating. But they're good fun to do, and I do enjoy doing them. And I also film my adventures out and about when I find stuff and bits and pieces. And um, I've had some fun, with that channel a couple of years ago. It was at its peak. I was doing a lot of content between 2018 and 2020, and then I just focused on this channel. To be fair, if Ireland did rejoin, how many would choose to play for England, Wales, and Scotland? Wow. Um, yeah, Johnny Evans is a better defender than Harry Maguire. Um, at least he's won a Premier League. Oh, yeah, Johnny Evans was a pretty solid defender in his day. They, Northern Ireland have had some very very good players for such a small population size and such a small player base. Um, they've had some very very good players. Uh, Difficulty is, and I do stress this. It's a difficult choice, especially when you're a young player and you're given the option to get to international level and represent the country. You're more likely to get selected for a smaller nation because they've got a small player base. So if you're a young player and you're 16, 17, you've played some youth games for, let's say, Ireland or Northern Ireland or Wales or Scotland, or you've got an English parent, it can be a head turner when let's say you're an Irish player, but you may have a Welsh parent, or you're an Irish player, but you might have an American parent. There's one for you. There's a big Irish community in the US, and there's links between Ireland and the US. I imagine if the US were like, oh, we've got the World Cup. Let's say the World Cup in 4 years' time. There's a player from Ireland who's one of his parents is Irish, one of his parents is American, and he's played some youth football for Ireland, and the Americans go, hey, this guy's eligible to play for us. He hasn't played any senior games for Ireland yet. He's played some youth football, but he hasn't met the threshold to not be eligible for selection. And they come along and go, play for us. We're hosting a World Cup. You know the USA is a host, so therefore they've already qualified. Ireland don't necessarily have a chance. Maybe could miss out. That is a big choice for a young player to make. Same with England. Kevin Kilbane had the same. Kevin Kilbane, former Ireland international, and he played for Everton and Sunderland amongst other clubs in the Premier League. He was born in Preston. He's got a very Lancastrian accent. Okay, born in Preston, and he had the same debate as Declan Rice did, and he chose Ireland because I think his dad was very very Irish and was a builder, but he was born in Preston. He wasn't born in Ireland, born in Preston. He chose to play for Ireland. Declan Rice has was born in London, um, but he has Irish parentage, and yeah, ended up obviously um, uh, now playing for England, and that did cause a big divide on social media. The Irish fans were fuming. English fans were like, "Ah, we just added another good young up and coming prospect of a player to our player base who's eligible for selection," and it really created a massive, massive massive divide. Yeah, there are a lot of people of Irish descent, especially in the northeast of the US and on the eastern seaboard of Canada. Um, a lot of people, city of Boston, for example, but Boston is known for its Irish. Boston and New York, Hell's Kitchen, for example. Um, where do I draw the line? Look, there is a discussion that needs to be had. I think rugby union, rugby league, the same thing applies. The nationality debate and the rules, because you can qualify under residency. I mean, at one point, England were having a goalkeeping crisis, and they were tempted to call up Manuel Almunia because he'd lived here for so long and therefore qualified as a British resident. Let that sink in. Manuel Almunia playing for England because Spain had overlooked him for so long, and he was obviously Arsenal and then Watford goalkeeper. And there was, I think, we had some injury in goal or something, or there was someone unavailable to injury or suspension, and they were like, we need a goalkeeper. We need some goalkeeping. Let's get Manuel Almunia into the um, England side. I think, where do I draw the line? It's complicated because there's a rugby league player called Dominic Young who was eligible to play for Jamaica or England. Of course, Jamaica qualified for the Rugby League World Cup. Obviously, England are hosts. He's playing for the Newcastle Knights in the Australian Rugby League right now, in the NRL, and he still hasn't decided if he's going to play for Jamaica or England. The World Cup is in 7 weeks. He has still not gone, you know what, I'm going to play for this team or this team, even though he's born in the UK, come through the Huddersfield youth and then first grade system, gone over to the NRL. He still has not decided whether he's going to play for Jamaica or for England. Jackson Hastings, born and raised in Sydney. One of his parents is English. He's played for Great Britain. He wants to play in the World Cup. He's trying to recover from a broken leg. Um, he's played for Great Britain before. I don't think he's eligible now to play for Australia because he hasn't played State of Origin. He's now played for a Tier 1 or Grade A nation. The Saifiti brothers probably going to play for Samoa. The Fafita brothers probably going to play for Tonga again. Yeah, the eligibility argument is quite frustrating. Rugby league is complicated, especially rugby league is exceptionally complicated, and it's the lack. I mean, it is frustrating. Just if when you watch the World Cup next month, month and a half's time when it kicks off on October the 15th. Most of the Greek team, apart from I think one, maybe two players, are Australian. You know, they're the sons or grandsons of immigrants, and they're mostly from Sydney. There's a big Greek community. Watch Strictly Ballroom. The female lead in that film is meant to be of Greek Cypriot descent. That's the drip feeding. It's meant to be of Greek Cypriot descent. That's a great film, by the way. It's 30 years old now. Strictly Ballroom. Definitely one of my favourite films growing up. Fantastic film. Loved it. Rugby league, yeah, you were going to see a lot of head scratching, but that guy's also played for the New Zealand Maori, or whatever, or the New Zealand Nines, or played Sevens, or whatever. Same with the women's rugby league as well. When I was watching the NRLW last weekend, there's players who play for Queensland who are also eligible for Tonga, Samoa, Cook Islands. Same with New South Wales, State of Origin. When I was watching it, they're eligible to play for Australia, Cook Islands, Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, PNG. It gets a bit ridiculous, and therefore I think it weakens rugby league internationally. I understand there's a big Pacifica, which is now the term you've got to use for the Pacific nations, communities on the east coast of Australia, absolutely. Polynesian, Pacifica, depends on how they identify as their background. The Cook Islands, Charles Nicol Klokstad could also play for, technically, if Norway had a team, because his dad's Norwegian. Returning Zelezniak could technically play for Poland because of his dad. Blake Austin's played for Portugal, England, and Great Britain. And he's played City Country Origin in Australia, which technically is a forerunner for the New South Wales Blues. That's what I find a bit of a head scratcher. Um, Jackson Hastings has played for Great Britain. Let that sink in. With the most Sydney accent you're going to find. Um, you could argue, yeah, there's less. There are less. The Vunipolas could play for Tonga. Felipe, is it Faletau? Talupe Faletau could play for Tonga because his dad played for Tonga, even though he was born in Wales, in Glamorgan. Um, got Tuolangi. All his brothers have played for Samoa. He got in by residency. Um, could Hawaiian born players? This is an interesting one because you've got Western Samoa and America, well, American Samoa and Samoa, formerly Western Samoa. And a lot of the American Samoans obviously play NFL. Or the US national side. It's a difficult one because Hawaiians obviously state in the US. Um, I would say that they're US. They're American. Yeah, Cook Islands. Most of the Cook Islands or people of Cook Islands heritage are either in the east coast of Australia or in Auckland. There are more people in Auckland who are Cook Islands descent than are actually currently living in the Cook Islands. There are more people in the Gold on the Central Coast who are from the Cook Islands than live in the Cook Islands. Let that sink in. And they've had some great players play for the Cook Islands as well. Like Charles Nicoll-Klokstad and Dylan Napa are the two big name players who are going to be playing for the Cook Islands in this year's World Cup. There you go. I went to the same school as the Vunipolas. They could have represented 4 countries. Yes, they could have. Which is again, this is where the selection will start becoming so. It's the same in football as well. It's the same in cricket. One of my school friends is Max Leaf, who plays for the Bristol Bears. I played alongside him in for a couple of games in inter-house rugby. There you go. Yeah, well, Ireland's not as many as you think, and Australia, they're mostly born actually in Australia to immigrant parents. But the selection rules are becoming just a nightmare, absolute nightmare, and I think it does devalue in the international game massively, absolutely massively. But it's the global games, it's global sport. People are allowed to have freedom of movement. Like I said, the Pellini brothers in ice hockey, one represents Great Britain, one represents Canada. They were both born in Guildford. Their dad was playing for the Guildford Flames back in the day, and one I think is now playing. Play for Arizona and Chicago in the NHL, and the other one plays down the road. Their dad was just playing ice hockey in the UK. They were born in Guildford, um, and yeah, one decided to stay here, one went home. So it works out, and one decided to go into the junior hockey system in Canada and get drafted, and one decided to stay in the UK and play in the UK, and they have a connection as their class is British Canadian. They have dual nationality. Um, but one decided to play with the Canadian national side, and one decided to play with the British national side. And there you go. They do have the All Stars team, yes. Why did they? Because basically Scotland, Wales, and Ireland just don't have the player base, and Wales is the only other nation really in the UK that has the player base to really sustain a national side. And Welsh Rugby League's a mess. Um, it just is. Tuolangi is the one that often gets the stick from Augustine Pichot. Augustine Pichot has tried very, very hard to grow the game when he was involved with World Rugby. He campaigned passionately to get Argentina into the Rugby Championship. He's obviously stood for election to the World Rugby presidency and narrowly lost to Bill Beaumont. I think he's justified in some of the criticism he gives out. Argentina has suffered with some of their best players ending up playing for Italy, for example, historically, because of obviously the links between Italy and Argentina with immigration as well. And some of their what could have been their better, and I think he's justified in some of his criticism of the international selection rules. And I think that was part of his platform was we need to tighten this up if we are to have the game benefit everyone in a more even, fair way, and the smaller tier two nations allowed to develop and keep their talent. Yeah, the All Blacks would not be as strong as they are. The Aussies and the Kiwis have been pilfering talent from the tier two and tier three Pacific Island nations for decades. For decades. And also Australia and to a certain extent New Zealand have also been pilfering rugby league of some of their best talent for decades because they can't produce enough themselves, especially Australia. Australia pays these mercenary contracts to players to get them to cross codes. Wendell Sailor is a prime example. Lottie Takiri is another one from the late 90s, early 2000s. They were great rugby league winners, by the way. Absolutely fantastic players in rugby league. I know there's a massive 60% of Argentinians are Italian by heritage. 60%. So that's what 18, 19 million people are of Italian descent in Argentina. 60% of Argentinians are Italian. Messi is technically Italian. Maradona is an Italian surname. Messi is an Italian surname. Sergio Parisse, remember him? Yeah, Argentinian. Castro Giovanni, yeah, Argentinian. Or at least one parent was born in Argentina. And I think 20% of Argentinians who are Italian were born there. Obviously, during just after World War II, a lot of Italians emigrated again, and before World War One, a lot of Italians emigrated because of economic conditions. Yeah, because he'd obviously met the criteria. Because also, one of his parents is of Italian heritage, one of his parents is of Spanish Argentinian heritage, and I think you've got to have a grandparent who is of heritage. So he could represent three countries: Spain, Italy, and Argentina. Um, but no, Messi is he's not a very Spanish name; it's a very Italian name. I'll tell you that. You look at the makeup of Argentinians and their heritage; it's mostly Italian. Yeah, they speak Spanish because it was obviously a Spanish colony. But the Italians went over there for work, economic opportunities, and it's a very complicated history. But Galtieri, the former military junta leader, Italian heritage. Um, quite quite a few of their Di Maria, okay, Di Maria. Guess what? Italian heritage. Um, there's also quite a few Germans over in Argentina. There's a massive German population in Argentina as well. Gabriela Hinsa. Um, yeah, there's a population in Patagonia of Welsh. They were Presbyterians who went over there, and they do. Yeah, there is Bariloche is where a lot of them live. Gabriela Hinsa is of German heritage. Mario Kempes, German heritage. Rennie Hausmann, German heritage. So some of the great Argentinians to play for their national side are of German heritage. It's an immigrant society. It's an immigrant society. Argentina is very European in their outlook. Very, very European. And yes, there is a Welsh population out in Argentina. There's also quite a big English population as well out in Argentina historically for going over there, and they've obviously intermarried, and so they now all speak Spanish. But yeah, railway workers, industrialists, steel workers, doctors, lawyers, landowners. Yeah, Argentina is a massive country. Um, it was part of the obviously the Spanish Empire in South and Central America, and then yeah, a lot of conflict and yeah, yeah, they do. But guess what the national sport in Argentina is? It's not football. It's not rugby. It's not hockey. Guess what the national sport in Argentina is? It's polo. Yeah, the centre half Brown. He died recently. He's dead now. Yeah, I think yeah he was of English descent. Um, there's a lot of Italians in Switzerland as well, by the way. There's a fair proportion of Swiss are actually of Italian descent. Um, I've been through the Italian bit of Switzerland. It's fantastic. It's the nicest bit. Um, yeah, like the interesting. Argentina is a very complex country. Obviously, the Falklands debate and bits and pieces like that. But no, their heritage of their players. Argentina has the same problem as some of the Pacific Island nations when it actually comes to football players. Um, Camoranesi, Argentinian, played for Italy. Both his parents were Italian, and he moved back. Um, there is there has been Di Stefano played for both Spain and Argentina. He could have also played for Italy as well, ironically. There has been a crossover for a very, very long time. And Argentina has actually lost players to Spain and Italy historically in football and rugby, um, even in very recent times, who were eligible also to play for them. And they nearly lost Messi. And this is where I think Augustine Pichot, when he was ranting and raving, and I think fairly rightly so, that pro- progressing tier two nations and breakout tier two nations who are on the cusp of going up, and Argentina have always been a very good rugby nation anyway, and Uruguay are becoming the same, are having their best players poached from them and emerging. And he was saying, and he also said from his own personal experience, there were players that he came through with who ended up playing for Italy or you know sportsmen of his generation who ended up playing for Spain or Italy in football, Italy in rugby, which held Argentina back, especially in rugby union, for a very, very long time. And he felt that wasn't fair. And I think he was right. Um, absolutely. And there you go. I mean, it's very complex, but you can understand where Augustine Pichot was coming from when with the criticism of the current selection. And they do need tidying up, and they do need fixing. Um, no, it was just the British in general. The Welsh went over there because they were escaping religious persecution for being Presbyterian and Methodist, I think, and a form of Welsh Presbyterianism. And they didn't go to rugby country. They didn't go to Buenos Aires or Rosario. Or Salta. They went right down into Patagonia, where no one really did. Yeah, Chile is actually ironically very Scandinavian in its architecture in parts of southern half of Chile because of the fjords. They've got a link with Britain as well. Um, and again, they play rugby and football because of the British, not because of Spanish influence. And yeah, the Chileans they have improved massively. And Major League Rugby has had a positive impact on the Chilean national side. That is something that I have noted over the last few years, and they've taken those leaps and bounds forward. Time will tell whether Major League Rugby is going to. They did. The Battle of Santiago between Chile and Italy, which is probably has been described as the most violent game ever played. Followed closely, I would say, with the 1974 match between Brazil and Holland. Yes, they are. I would say they are. There's a reason why they qualified. There's a reason why the US have got into the repechage, and then you have to look at Major League Rugby and is it benefiting or hindering the national program of the US and the Canadian national programs in crisis. Um, the The US program, I think, could use this as a learning experience, but their women's program's doing really well. So again, what's going on here? Can Venezuela improve at football? They're South American. Uh, Venezuela, as a country's got a lot of social and economic and political problems right now. Um, but they are a football mad country. But there's a lot of corruption in Venezuela. There's a lot of deprivation, economic problems. But they have a very good youth side. They've got some good young players actually coming through. So there's hope. But we'll see. I would say there needs to be better coordination between Major League Rugby and USA Rugby. There needs to be better coordination. There needs to be better cooperation between the league, which is franchise based, which all North American leagues are, and the governing body that also governs the national side with pathways, player development, and the club country debate. There needs to be better communication and cooperation between the two if the US is to avoid not qualifying for the World Cup. Um, there definitely needs to be better coordination and cooperation between USA Rugby and Major League Rugby in order to improve the national side and pathways and fix a lot of the issues that are clearly manifesting themselves because they're in the repechage tournament, so all is not lost, but there are some potential hiccups. Is South America qualifying too long for them to have a chance? I don't know. But the fact that baseball is the national sport and there is massive social and political issues and economic issues in Venezuela, it's another reason why things are where they are. Yeah, it would definitely be very, very damaging for the US considering that they're hosting the World Cup. Um, you know, 2031 and 2033, the men and women's games. Yeah, that would be a problem. And the Canadians not qualifying that's never happened before. Former quarter finalists, so that's another big blow. So both USA and Canada need to have a long, hard look at what's going wrong with their systems, their structures, and their development on the men's side. On the women's side, the US and Canada are very, very good and are really developing well. The men's side of it, they're stagnating and declining, and have got themselves in a situation where things aren't looking great, and it's hard to then sell the game to a growing fan base if your national side doesn't do very well. Yeah, Venezuela is a very complex country as well with its political history and its you know economics and its sporting history. It is a baseball mad country. Yes, Latin. It's one of the big Latin America. It's one of the big producers of Latin of Major League Baseball players as well, Latin American heritage. And there is a big Venezuelan community in the US. So there's a big Colombian community in the US. If Suriname and Guyana join CONMEBOL, would they get any points? It might actually benefit their club game. It might benefit their league structures, ironically, joining the South American over CONCACAF, possibly. Um, they'll probably take points off each other. Um, you never know. South American footballers, but they're very Caribbean in outlook. They're very, very Caribbean in their outlook. Central Americans, Caribbean in their outlook with their links to Holland and the UK. Their outlook is completely different to the rest of South America, which is Latino. So yeah, no, the youth setup. They've got some good young players, and some of their top players do play in European clubs. So it is what it is. Um, but no, I don't. It will be interesting to see how things play out with nations like Venezuela and what happens with the US rugby, whether they qualify for the World Cup or if they fail in the repechage tournament. It will be interesting to see how Chile do in their first World Cup and if that is a springboard for further development of the game uh, and the sport in South America. Rugby League World Cup, I mean, yes, but it's going to be fun watching it. It'll be interesting to see how Jamaica and Greece do at their first tournament. It'll be interesting to see actually how I think the Australians are looking vulnerable. I think New Zealand and Tonga look quite dangerous. Edgar Davids is either from Suriname or the Dutch Antilles. Um, Definitely of Caribbean descent, but he could also be of slightly Indonesian descent as well because Indonesia used to be a Dutch colony. But that's okay. Yeah, it would be nice to see the Portuguese get back. I think that in 4 years' time they could definitely do that. It's quite possible. We could see Portugal back at the World Cup. Absolutely. It's not unfounded. It's not a wild stab in the dark with that one. Um, they've got some good players and they play a good style. And it was refreshing to see some new nations when it's always refreshing to see new first time qualifiers in sports like rugby league and rugby union to the top table. Football, it doesn't seem to be as refreshing. How much worse would French be with overseas territories? Look, they've got a massive immigrant. Look at their national teams. A lot of immigrant players from their former colonies that are now independent nations. Um, I wouldn't say they'll be that worse off without their overseas territories because a lot of their players actually come from their former African and Asian and uh, Caribbean colonies anyway. Um, Through immigration back to France following independence of countries like Algeria and Morocco, Tunisia and countries like Mali and Senegal. Um, they benefited massively from economic migrants in the last 60 years following decolonialisation going back to France. Um, they have benefited massively. I wouldn't they wouldn't be that bad or that bad off. There would still be a massive wave of immigration going back to metropolitan France from their overseas territories, and it still happens today. Countries like Benin, for example, um, uh, and Togo and places like that. There's still major. There, it continues to happen now with the immigration continues to go to France. It I don't think it would affect them that much personally. Um, I don't think it will affect them that much, but that's my point of view on it. I don't think they get overly affected. Most of the players are of second or third generation anyway, of immigrant descent. In the French national side, I don't think it impacts them. I think their own domestic league um, and the weakness of it impacts them more than losing their overseas territories. Um, who has good youngsters? Which country we talking about having good youngsters? I don't know how South Sudan are doing in sports. South Sudan has basically been in a state of conflict since 1983. Do we need to stop the African Cup of Nations every 2 years? It's boring. Well, it definitely devalues it, but at the same time, that's what AFCON wants um, with their product. Oh, Portugal, they've got a decent seven system, and they are an emerging nation. They are improving. They've made a World Cup. Watching them last year in November against Japan, they played quite well. They played quite well. So I think that there's an opportunity for Portugal to possibly qualify for the next World Cup in 4 years' time. I don't know how if we need to stop it every 2 years. The quality isn't great. If you watch the African Cup of Nations this year, it was really poor. I'm being quite honest with that. Um, not great quality. I was really disappointed with the quality. I only watched a handful of games and I found it really disappointing. Um, but there's some good African players out there. But I would say no. That was a proposal, and it doesn't get acted on just yet. Again, I think fans would be against it massively. And look what happened with the European Super League. With we'll set up our own rival competition to Champions League. fell apart within 48 hours. It had collapsed. It's a proposal. Look on social media. Fans are there. The fans that are in favour of the Asian and African fans. But that's the reason why they're expanding the World Cup, to get those fans on side. It was a proposal that was put forward. Nobody in Europe or North America or South America is interested. They're the major federations you want to keep on board. And FIFA's already risking angering the powerhouses of football, basically. This is where the World Cups are going to be hosted. This is where the money and the game is made, is in those leagues and in those national sides and with those superstar players. You risk turning off the hardcore fans. You won't attract new fans. Trying to sell empty stadiums on TV to other fans doesn't work very well. This is why the MLS struggled in the early years. Is the stadiums were massive, 100,000 seat NFL stadiums with 5,000 fans in. You couldn't sell that to the American. It didn't look great for the American sports market buying in, even if the games were actually quite entertaining. The fact the stadiums were half empty didn't look good when trying to sell that to the domestic fan base. That's why it took so long until David Beckham comes along for fans to buy it. Interesting concept. Interesting concept. In theory, it's doable. In practical terms, not really, with the infrastructure required. No, I don't think they would be missed overly if Europe and South America came up, and maybe North America, CONCACAF came up and we'll have our own tournament. I don't think. Um, no, they protested before the game. There was a big protest outside the stadium before the game, but Man United, Liverpool, regardless of whether clubs are in the league table and how they're doing, is always going to sell out, and form does go out the window with that game. It's a game that will always sell out, regardless of, as I say, the league position of either club concerned. And both clubs have had a poor start to the season, and there is no denying that. But come the end of the season, we'll see where both clubs end up. I think this league season is the most open we're going to see for a long time. I think the World Cup, the impact it is going to have with some clubs like Liverpool and Man City and Chelsea more heavily impacted, for example, by players going to the World Cup than, let's say, Newcastle or Leicester. Will be interesting to see how that factors into the second half of the season. Player fitness, injuries, suspensions, that kind of thing. It'll be very interesting to see how that factors in. But they staged a protest half hour before kickoff. And again, the fan bases around football have organised very, very effectively via social media and communicate with each other, and they helped show their anger with the European Super League. Within 48 hours, they had organised every fan base of the clubs involved and the clubs not involved, and they said no, and that was Europe wide. They were like not having it, and very, very quickly. What came out of that was, if the Fenway Sports Group, right, come out of this as the least dodgy of the American owners, is the best way I'm going to phrase it. The least hated, and they got destroyed on social media. Just imagine what the Glaziers and Kroenke at Arsenal, they were just well, it's still there in name only. But I think the fans have said enough's enough, and let Barcelona and Real Madrid go bankrupt for all I care. Juventus aren't the dominant force in Italian football anymore, and how we've got to this situation where Barcelona can't register players in time, and players like Casemiro, for example, have been sold by Real Madrid for below market value, and that's sinking. Tells you all you need to know about their finances and the state they've got themselves in, and there should be no sympathy And yeah, I think the club owners have now realised without their domestic fans, the fans who actually go week in, week out going to games and in support, they will never sell the product. Never sell the product. And it's the Champions League and the domestic leagues that get sold globally, especially to the US, where they bought in massively. And even the American fans were like, we don't want this. We like the history. We like the club histories. We like the community link. We like the history and the culture behind the game. We don't want this fake plastic closed shop kind of league. And I wouldn't say the Premier League is so far in front. I think the Premier League does have problems. It does have problems. All the leagues have massive problems. Um, and I wouldn't say the Premier League's so far in front necessarily. I would just say that's a false narrative. I would say it's more competitive. I wouldn't say it's so far in front. Um, but the Premier League's got problems. Um, the fans don't want a Euro Super League, but the corporates do. If they do it, then forcing selling an unpopular product generally doesn't sell, does it? It's like the Ford Pinto. They were like, it's not selling well in South America, especially Brazil. I wonder why. Pinto means little penis in South American Latino slang, and they wondered why it's not selling. Let that sink in. Corporations, guess what, get it wrong a lot of the time. And bad PR, guess what? Sponsors will look at that and go, oh, bad PR there. Oh dear, we can't sell this product. A bad advertising campaign can damage a product. A bad public image can damage a product. Oh yeah, the fake TV contracts they signed up that were actually to get around taxes. Yeah. Mm. The TV contracts that had what behind them. And if they're in breach of contract, they will be sued. And corporations don't like getting sued. Um, because the clubs will technically be in breach of the contracts they've signed with their leagues in the Champions League, UEFA, um, they will be sued to shit, right? And then the overseas broadcasters like, we didn't sign up for this. They're being expelled. Well, we didn't. Think of it this way, like NBC, for example, or ESPN in the US, going, well, we signed up for this contract, and we're trying to sell the product with the Big Six, for example, right, in the league. They've just been expelled from the league for going to the breakaway league. They've been thrown out. We can't. This is in breach of the contract we signed because we signed to have 20 teams. We've now got 14. The original 20 that we were going to have this season are in there. We can't sell this. They'll be sued to hell. The players didn't seem to be in favour of it. If you can't get your staff on board, let alone your customers, you are not going to sell a product. You are not going to sell a product. If they try it, they'll fail. People will vote with their wallets, and at the moment, with the rising of cost of things, no one will want to buy it. And those clubs risk going into the wilderness, and therefore, really, yeah, it is what it is. Will the biggest teams just keep bigger, or will the smaller teams start catching up? Depends what you class as a big team and a small team. There comes a point where every team has to go through a low point in their history and a lack of success. Man United are finding that out now for the first time since the 70s and the 80s. So for the first time in 30, 40 years, 3, 4 decades, that Man United are figuring out what Liverpool went through for the last 30 years. Um, the Every team goes through a more successful period and a least successful period. If and when the new spending rules are brought in, it will readjust things massively. And a lot of these clubs, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players who've still got a fair few miles left in the tank end up playing in the MLS. because of the new spending rules that are going to be brought in around 2024. Um, let that sink in. I would say that there's Leicester City managed to do it. They're not a small club, they're not a massive club, but they've got great history and they've won silverware before, and they're well run on decent money. What do you class as a small and a big club? Um, what's the definition? Is it fan base? Is it money? Is it success? Is it what is it? Because I'm trying to figure out what the definition is. Look, Tottenham can't win anything, and they class themselves as one of the big six. I haven't won fuck all. They've won 2 league titles in their history. Let that sink in. Burnley have won the same amount of league titles as Spurs. Huddersfield have won more league titles than Spurs. Let that sink in. Just let that sink in. Yet Spurs are claiming they won the big six. Um, if there was fairer distribution of the TV money in the Premier League and a salary cap put in place and a transfer cap, then it's a more balanced league. It's even more competitive. It's only even more. Um, after the Premier League, what is the most watched English sports league? The Championship is the third biggest football league in the world for viewership. Um, and then I would say like the NBA, the NFL, NHL, one of the North American leagues probably gets a lot of views. That's an interesting one. I don't think surveys have been done after the English Football League system. So Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, local teams. I don't think surveys have been done over what British fans watch. So the domestic football leagues, obviously. So we'll even include the Scottish league system with Rangers, Celtic, Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen, all that kind of stuff. I couldn't tell you. Um, Probably rugby union's probably quite popular because you've got the United Rugby Championship and you've got the English Premiership domestically in the UK. Rugby League got the Super League, and then the leagues like Championship and League One. And again, that's very popular in the north, but also you've got 2 teams in London, so there's fans in the southeast. I don't know, quite honestly. It would be interesting to see if surveys were done, what the responses are for overseas leagues. That would be interesting. I think the NRL does have a decent following in this country for rugby league. The North American Big Four would obviously rate quite highly, I would have thought, especially the NFL and NBA. We will see. Will Hibs, Hearts, and Aberdeen? The Scottish football outside the old firm needs investment. Um, does need investment. Look, I'm happy. I've done some history on some of the Scottish clubs, and I will happily do more videos on Scottish clubs like Aberdeen and Hibs and Hearts and Motherwell and some of the other Scottish clubs in due course. I'm more than happy. Will they challenge again? How long's a piece of string? Yes and no. Aberdeen's had its opportunities in the last 15 years and failed. Hibs had an opportunity, Hearts have had an opportunity and come up short. So the opportunity's been there. They haven't capitalised upon it. So there has to come a point where Scottish fans go, is this really helping our sport? Is this really helping our domestic league, having these 2 clubs just swap titles every so often? But the opportunities in the past have been there over the generations, and they haven't been continued upon. And that's what I think damages and weakens the Scottish game is that lack of sustained success of a lengthy period of time by Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts. Do Celtic and Rangers get brought back there in the league? The fact that they play each other 4 times a year in the league system anyway devalues it. There's already talk about combining this. If they combine the Scottish Premiership, the Scottish Championship, that might actually make the league more competitive. And then combine League One and League Two together to form the Scottish Championship might improve things. So then you've only played each other twice a season rather than 4 times a season. Um, Other than that, I don't know what else to suggest to improve the quality of the Scottish league system. It's just not good enough. Simple as, not good enough. I don't know what else to really add to that. It's just not good enough. Um, uh, what else can I add? Really? Um, I mean, and the last Scottish club to win European success was Aberdeen in the 80s under Sir Alex Ferguson in the early 80s. So let that sink in. That's how much Scottish football has declined. It's obvious the national side's only qualified for one major tournament in 20 years. It let that sink in. 24 years. Let that sink in. One major tournament, 24 years, the national side's qualified for. Wales and Northern Ireland have qualified for more international tournaments than Scotland in that time frame. Let that sink in. Because the way the league is structured and the lack of money, it ironically damages Celtic and Rangers long term as well. Um, and there are some fantastic fan bases in Scottish football, absolutely, but unfortunately, the TV deal, the collapse of Setanta hasn't helped. Back in 2008, that's had a massive impact, massive impact on the Scottish system as well. Yeah, yeah, the lack of investment, the lack of money, the poor TV deal, and really the Scottish FA is quite dodgy as well. The Scottish FA has got a lot of questions to answer with some really poor decisions, um, and allegations of some dodginess going on as well. So there's a whole host of issues at play that need to be addressed, and they're not being. And there you go. How many big Scottish clubs are there? Yeah, the two Edinburgh clubs, the two Glasgow. Well, you could Partick have got a good fan base as well, technically, and they are a Glaswegian club. Five. You could say Motherwell makes six. The two Dundee clubs make it eight. The other two Dundee and Dundee United. Um, I think Falkirk have won the Scottish League once as well, the Scottish Cup once. I can't remember this one. I think Falkirk have won some silverware. But in reality, the reality is the Scottish League is it is what it is. What it is. It's the lack of investment in recent years. It's the lack of funding. They're not producing. It's correct. They're not producing the youth talent as they used to be. Because Rangers and Celtic will go. All the other Scottish clubs will nick your best players. That's what they've done as well. They will nick your best players then. Um, oh yeah, Rangers and Celtic, they do nick their best players of their rivals when they're developing, and it's hard to get a foothold at any point. Really is. Um, yeah, Inverness Caledonian Thistle is actually is a very young club in its history. Actually, it's a combination of a couple of clubs that merged together. Um, you got Ross County and Inverness Cali Thistle. That's possibly the most northern football derby in English. And Wraith Rovers as well. But no, outside of Aberdeen and St Johnstone in Perth, they've won the cup double last year. The first time that hasn't gone to the old firm in a while, winning both cups in a year for St Johnstone. Yes, Dundee. Yes, Dundee is very historical, and again, um, Dundee and Dundee United. Again, I'm going to have to do the club histories. You'll have to wait and find out. You'll have to wait and find out. why Dundee and Dundee United exist. And I'll do that in the club histories. They've been successful in their history, but again, lack of money, lack of investment, um, the economic situation of Scotland in certain areas. There's a whole host of reasons why the Scottish League is in the situation. I've done videos on it. I must do some more club history videos. To be fair, I have to. No, I like the fact you got Dundee and Dundee United. I like that. I like that fact. I think that's a unique fact, but I think it's good for Scottish football. It's actually a good thing. Um, it's a really good thing, in my opinion. Um, I just wish like some of the other Scottish clubs got some investment. I really do because I think it would massively benefit the Scottish League. Massively benefit the Scottish League. But anyway, I'm going to call that a day. I will do some club histories on the Scottish clubs. I've done some. I've done St Mirren. I've done St Johnstone. I might do Kilmarnock as well at some point. Um, Liverpool, Chelsea's in better shape. Neither. I think they're both going to have down years. I think Klopp's job's safe. Klopp's got. I think he's safe in his position. But Tuchel, I'm not. I'm not sure. Thomas Tuchel. I think he might have already lost the dressing room, and I don't think he's strengthened the side in the summer. I think with the situation that Chelsea had, I think he's done a good job to keep as many players there as possible. But I think Chelsea. I think they're going to part ways with Tuchel sooner rather than later, in my opinion. Um, so there you go. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate all your comments, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.